This first story comes from a subscriber who wants to remain anonymous. It happened in 2014 in a small town in New Hampshire. I was 19 at the time, working the night shift at a local gas station. It was around 2 a.m. A dense fog had rolled in earlier that evening, completely blanketing the area. It was thick enough that I couldn't even see the pumps from the register window. It was dead silent outside, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint static on the radio. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the glass front door. I looked up, expecting a customer. The fog outside was like a solid white wall. I couldn't see anything. Assuming it was a bird or just the wind, I went back to looking at my phone. A few minutes later, the knock came again. This time, it was harder. Thud! Thud! I got up from the counter and walked toward the door. The exterior lights were useless against the fog. As I approached the glass, a shape began to form. It was a man, but he was unnervingly tall, maybe 7 feet. He was wearing a dark, heavy overcoat that was ragged at the hem. He just stood there, motionless, a black silhouette carved into the white mist. I didn't open the door. "Can I help you?" I called through the glass. No answer. He didn't move. He felt wrong, as if he wasn't really standing there, but was part of the fog itself. Then, slowly, he raised a hand to the glass. His fingers were impossibly long and thin. I recoiled, my heart hammering. He leaned forward, pressing his face against the pane. There were no lights on his face, no eyes, just 2 dark, empty sockets staring into mine. I scrambled backward and locked myself in the back office, calling 911. By the time the police arrived, the fog had lifted slightly. The man was gone. There were no footprints found on the ground, despite the recent rain. But it was the CCTV footage that truly terrified us. In the video, you can see me walking to the front door, speaking through the glass and running back. But outside the glass, the CCTV showed absolutely nothing. No tall man, no empty eye sockets, just the swirling white fog. This next story was sent in by a truck driver named Mark. Mark spent a lot of time on desolate roads, especially during night shifts. This particular night, he was driving on a logging road in a remote part of Washington state. The fog was brutal. It was like driving into a void, with only about 5 feet of visibility, even with his high beams on. The road was narrow, flanked by dense forest. It was slow going, and Mark was exhausted, but determined to reach his destination. Suddenly, his lights illuminated something in the road directly ahead. He slammed on the brakes, the semi sliding slightly before coming to a stop. He peered through the windshield. Standing in the middle of the road was a woman. She was wearing a flowing white dress that seemed to dissolve into the edges of the fog. Her head was bowed, her hair obscuring her face. Assuming she was lost or injured, Mark slowly rolled his window down. "Ma'am, do you need some help?" he called out. She didn't respond. She stood completely still, like a statue. A sudden chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning filled the cabin. Mark carefully eased the truck forward, trying to pull up alongside her. As he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. He saw that her feet were not touching the ground. She was floating, hovering just inches above the asphalt, entirely supported by the mist. Panic flared. He jammed his foot on the accelerator, roaring past her. He didn't look back, focusing only on the road ahead. But then, he happened to glance into his rearview mirror. The woman hadn't disappeared. She was moving, but not running. She was gliding through the air, perfectly keeping pace with the truck. Her white form was a blur in the mirror, staying right with him as the speedometer climbed past 60 miles per hour. The third story is from a group of friends who went camping in the mountains of North Carolina. They were experienced campers, but they were not prepared for what happened that weekend. They had set up their camp in a beautiful, secluded valley. On the second night, A thick fog began to crawl down the mountainsides, pooling in the valley floor. It arrived with an unnatural speed, swallowing their campfire and turning the entire world into a featureless gray maze. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Even the usual night insects had stopped chirping. Unsettled by the change, they quickly decided to retreat to their tents. 3 of them, including the storyteller, were sharing a large tent. They zipped the door securely and tried to ignore the eerie calm outside. But around 3 a.m., the storyteller woke up. A hand was pressing against the thin, nylon wall of the tent from the outside. The shape of a palm was clearly visible against the material, just inches from his face. Terrified, he woke his friends silently. The 3 of them sat frozen as another hand joined the first, the shapes sliding slowly down the tent wall. They could hear something breathing, a slow, rattling exhale that sounded like wet leaves. Then, a voice spoke, but it didn't sound like a mouth. It sounded like the sarsara of the wind itself, echoing from everywhere at once. "Let me in! It's too cold out here! Let me in!" Then, a sudden shriek ripped through the silence from outside. It came from the direction of the single tent their other friend David was using. The 3 of them scrambled to get their flashlights and tear open the zipper. They burst out into the fog, their light beams lost in the gloom. When they finally found David's tent, it was completely shredded. The poles snapped. David was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. All of his gear was still there, untouched. But David was nowhere to be found. A search team combed the area for days. They found no traces of him. But as they searched, members of the team reported seeing a tall, indistinct figure standing in the thickest patches of fog, always watching them, always just out of reach.